rugged shores and woodlands of the north, it's history of copper mines and iron ore, the Great Lakes fishery. To the farmlands of the southern counties we'll look around, my friend, and all that waits the sportsman in the state of Michigan. And sometimes when the moon brings out the diamonds in the snow, and the stillness of the forest lies encased in Arctic cold, the wind might whisper through the trees, listen if you can, it tells you of the beauty in the state of Michigan.
This is a bolt-action, high-powered rifle with a scope, one that's used widely for target and hunting. Please, this is not an assault rifle. This has legitimate recreational uses. But it's not the rifle we're going to talk about on tonight's show. Now, we're going to go back to the founding of this country, to the front stuffers, the muzzleloaders, the flintlocks and percussion cap guns that were really at the founding of this country. We're also going to have a safety tip, a very important one, and great recipes, a lot more. So stay tuned. I'm Fred Crost. It's Thursday night time for Michigan Outdoors. Okay, but tell me about this buck. It's not your first buck.
No, it's my first one with a muzzleloader. I've shot 3 others, but this is the first one I've ever shot with a muzzleloader.
Gary Romancic from St. John's took this buck during the 1986 firearm deer season with his muzzleloader. A friend of his, Don Cooper, got him interested.
That's a hell of a job.
Well, he just called up one morning, wanted to know what it's like getting into muzzleloading, and well, I told him it was a lot of fun, and so he wanted to know what kind of gun to get. And I said, well, these CVA.
Because muzzleloading is more complex than most firearms, it's a good idea to find an experienced shooter to help you get started.
And so he went down and bought a 50 caliber, and he's got his deer with it. That's the first year he's ever hunted with a muzzleloader.
Well, when did you start this, Gary? When did you call him up?
Oh, roughly about 3 months ago. And I got to shooting out here where we're at, and I enjoy hunting with it. I enjoy shooting it.
What is it about shooting a muzzleloader that turns your crank?
A lot of smoke out of the end of the barrel.
Really?
Yes, sir. A lot of smoke.
In slow motion, you can see it. Lots of smoke, all right, because of the black powder that's used in these colonial guns. Of the 2 types of muzzleloaders, Gary shoots the more modern percussion cap. At the start of the day, he puts caps on the nipples of his double barrel in order to dry out the chamber where the powder will be sitting. Oftentimes, condensation will form inside the barrels from moving indoors to outdoors, and this little move, that dries out the bottoms of the barrels. To load a muzzleloader, everything goes part by part, down through the muzzle. Homemade measuring horns from deer antlers measure the exact amount of powder Gary wants to shoot. This powder is the same black powder used during the 1800s. It's highly combustible, and muzzleloaders know the care that must be given to open gunpowder like this. Once the charge is down the barrel, a ball and a patch is loaded. Lead balls are used, round balls by the traditional shooters, and it's set on a greased patch on the muzzle. There's about a 10,000th of an inch tolerance between the ball and the barrel, and a ball starter is used to seat the ball firmly and get it going the right direction. When it's down the barrel, about 6 inches, the shooter grabs the ramrod and firmly drives the patch and the ball down to the powder. Not too tight against the powder, just snug. A double-barrel muzzleloader like Gary's is quite heavy, but they're becoming more popular because you can take 2 shots in a row without reloading, an advantage that compensates for the extra weight. Practice is necessary with these front stuffers. You not only need to practice shooting and setting your sights, but you need to practice loading, because in the field, when you have to reload, the conditions might not be ideal. Now the caps go into place. This is a shortcut from the more primitive flintlock rifles, but these caps almost guarantee 100% success of firing each time. You'll notice in a percussion rifle that it fires like most rifles, a quick recoil and an amazingly accurate shot. That's the percussion rifle. The more primitive muzzleloader is the flintlock. a predecessor to the more modern percussion cap method of firing. A flintlock holds a piece of flint in the hammer, which strikes against a steel frizzen to make the sparks that set off the powder. It takes a slow motion look to really see the sparks. This is the beginning of the chain reaction that Don Cooper will set off with his flintlock. There's a hole that connects the sparks to the powder in the barrel, which must be cleaned before every shot. To make sure the powder in the barrel will go off, some highly volatile, very fine 4F powder is placed in the pan right outside the pinhole. It happens quickly, but there's a big poof, a big flame called a flash in the pan, which happens a split second after the flint strikes the steel frizzen. At this point, the gun isn't going off, but Don shuts his eyes because of the flash. Not the best habit for accuracy, though, or safety. Now let's shoulder a fully loaded flintlock and watch the sequence of sparks and flashes. There's a spark when the hammer falls, but at the same time, Don is anticipating by closing his eyes. Let's hope he's holding it steady. The chain reaction, complete with smoke and fire, it makes shooting interesting to a lot of people.
It's not like today's modern guns, you know, where you just stuff, you know, a bunch of cartridges into it and shoot away. You know, you take a little more time on each shot, and you've got to reload after every shot, so you take a little more time.
Doesn't that slow you down, though? Doesn't it frustrate you a little bit that it takes so much time?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Muzzleloading doesn't frustrate Gary. He's seen enough frustration in the past 8 years since a motorcycle accident left him without his left arm or left leg. Determined to overcome the barriers that would keep him indoors, Gary's worked hard in rehabilitation and in shooting. So now he adds muzzleloading to his list of enjoyments in the great outdoors. Where does the hog's skin used to make pork rind lures come from? The only skin on a hog that's durable enough for fishing lures comes from the 6 to 8 inch strip of hide down the back on either side of the spine. The rest of the pig's skin is too soft to withstand the rigors of being used to tussle with bass, pike, muskie, and saltwater fish. Muzzleloading deer hunting. This is an activity that has captured the hearts of many hunters throughout the country, especially in the past 5 or 10 years. Seasons have been added for muzzleloader hunters towards the end of the regular firearm deer seasons, expanding the times that you can hunt. Plus, muzzleloading has a romance to it that I guess the modern firearms don't. The colonial weapons that are used, stalking through the woods like Daniel Boone. A lot of romance to it, right, Al Shady?
Right.
Al Shady's become a muzzleloading hunter. Right. You have a tale to tell, which relates to, well, you can find it in any book that tells about black powder hunting. And Al, it has here on page 8, big letters right at the top. Make no mistake about it, black powder or Pyrodex are the only propellant powders that are safe to use in muzzleloading firearms. You agree with that?
Absolutely. You know, you read that when you start out to put the muzzleloader together to start with. But you miss a few things along the way. It's good to go back and read it again.
You have to be extremely careful in muzzleloading. As Al will tell, we'll unveil this story here. What happened to you was you were at the dentist's office and you saw a nice little snow in December. It looked like a great tracking snow. Right. And you thought if you could get done with the dentist and get out hunting quickly.
Yep. I thought I'd get out there before it got dark and before the snow melted and see what was going on. So I ran through the garage and picked up all the stuff, my clothes and gun and whatever, grabbed the cans of powder off the shelf and ran out. Well, I get to the woods and slip on my clothes and reach for the gun, and I grabbed a can and just poured some powder down the barrel, put a ball and a cap on, and walked out into the woods.
Let's back up here, Al. I'm sure it's covered in this book on muzzleloading. You grab the cans off the shelf where you normally keep your cans of powder. Right. And a little fact here that slipped in, your son came home, who's a shotgun reloader.
Right.
mixed in some of his cans on the same shelf.
Right. Didn't pay any attention, didn't read the can.
Well, they look pretty much the same, right?
Well, they did to me at the time.
Did at the time, but he had grabbed the shotgun powder,
Right.
taken it out, dumped it into the muzzleloader. There's mistake number 2, not measuring it.
Absolutely.
But what you had done here, let's take a look at these powders. You brought some samples here. Here is the Pyrodex powder that you were used to shooting.
Right.
This is black powder, which is a substitute that
Which is what I thought I had.
you thought you had, but instead you had shotgun powder.
Right.
Shotgun powder, which is highly explosive, extremely fast burning. It's not supposed to be used in muzzle loaders. So there you were, your muzzle loader filled with possibly an overcharge
Right.
of smokeless explosive powder.
Right.
Off you go into the woods in December.
Yeah.
Al Shady, Daniel Boone, stalking the big buck. What happened?
Fortunately, I didn't see the big buck, because when I come back to the van at night after it got dark, or started to get dark, I decided to unload the gun, and of course the easiest way is to fire it. And so I pointed it at the ground and pulled the trigger, and
Let
of
her
course,
fly.
you know, I got all kinds of pieces, but I walked away from it.
Let's look at the gun. Here it is, your muzzle loader.
Right.
Was this the first time you'd used it, or second time?
No, about second time out with it.
Second time out with it. This muzzle loader is totally ruined, to say the least.
Right,
You held this in your hands when you fired it.
right.
It blew the whole thing apart. I mean, there's metal down here from the barrel. Jeez, oh, Pete,
There's
what a
6-inch pieces of barrel that are gone. I haven't the slightest idea where those went.
They flew off somewhere, but fortunately not in your body.
Right.
What were you wearing at the time?
I had on a pair of gloves, which it put a few holes in and took
Well, put that on there.
All right.
That looked like it would take your thumb right off.
Well, it probably should have, but it didn't. You know,
Didn't touch your thumb?
Didn't even burn the hair on the
be
thumb.
What about your jacket?
Well, it allowed me to find out that it was actually a down-filled coat.
Yeah,
It opened it up pretty well. And then,
but
of course,
it didn't hit you in the leg? or
didn't.
anything?
No, with the trousers that I had on, they were bib overalls enough that they protected from coming all the way through. But all these little powder and probably pieces of steel parts opened it up, and of course I ended up with one piece in my arm with a handful of chicken feathers that we had to take out surgically. But I walked away from it, and as far as I can tell, it's only because the Lord kept me there that I stayed there. Otherwise, I'd been gone.
When this gun exploded, I mean, the pressure it must have taken looking at this barrel here. When that exploded, it was pretty loud?
I didn't hear for a couple of days.
Is that right?
Yeah, the radio was nothing but rattle, and I've lost some hearing in one ear because of it, but I hear pretty well, but enough that wind noises in the woods now create difficulty in picking out sounds where they're coming from.
Well, this has turned Al Shady into somewhat of a muzzleloader safety expert. You load your gun now. In fact, you had all the ingredients. You had a pre-set charge of powder
Right.
that you carry with you. Now, and this is a good tip to preload at home.
Right.
And of course, this is labeled Pyrodex. And normally you would dump that powder charge from the preloaded
Right.
tube down the barrel.
Right.
Now, why didn't you do that?
Well,
in the
I
woods?
only had the one with me, and in case I had to have a second shot.
were kind of optimistic.
I was kind of planning ahead. You know, I was going to have a preloaded shot in case I had a second shot, and so I didn't want to pour that in the barrel, or otherwise I'd have normally used that.
Wow. And here's of course, companies make pre-charged loads here, and this one has, well, 2 of the primers. And also inside, there's powder in one side, pre-measured, black powder or Pyrodex. On the other side, well, actually down the tube, there's a patch and ball ready to go. So the thing is, you'd really recommend carrying a couple of these.
If you're going to, plan on shooting more than one shot, I think it's a good idea, I think, to preload them, yeah.
But especially to make sure that you know the powders you have in. These powders look so much alike. The Pyrodex black powder and the shotgun powder, if you get them mixed up, it could be a extremely dissatisfying experience, and I guess it was lucky that this wasn't a fatal mistake. If you had had this gun up to your cheek,
probably would have taken my head off, I think. You know, at least.
Al Shady's story is a lesson to all shooters, especially muzzleloaders. Read your instruction books and heed the warnings about the safe use and operation of your firearm. And when it comes to the difference between powders, keep in mind how they burn. Black powder, explosive by itself, burns in a flash. Lots of smoke, but it doesn't develop tremendous pressure. Pyrodex is a black powder substitute that is not as explosive, making it safer. Modern shotgun smokeless powder is quite difficult to ignite and burns slowly when it's loose, but when it's contained, it develops extremely high pressures that make it dangerous to use in older weapons or in muzzleloaders. Firearms have lots of positive recreational and practical uses, but please take your time, think about what you're doing, and use your gun safely.
Barbara Conklin's recipe for Zesty Pheasant Tartlets was a winner in our 1989 Wild Game Cooking Contest. It's real easy to see why. You're going to start out with thin sliced bread, which you roll even thinner, and then use the cookie cutter to make the little circles, and then dip in melted butter. These you're going to place in the miniature muffin tins. Now, if you're going to be doing a whole lot of those, like we will be for the Wild Game dinner in April at Mount Brighton, you can go ahead and make them at that point, and then just freeze them, and then take them out and fill them as you need them. And the filling has a lot of different ingredients in it. It's got Miracle Whip, and at this point you could use mayonnaise here if you wanted to substitute it for Miracle Whip. And then Parmesan cheese, and you only need about a quarter cup of it. And then your grated Swiss cheese, and here you could use cheddar if you wanted to make a substitute. And then a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, a little bit of diced onion, and Barbara says that she prefers that over the minced onion. And then your Worcestershire sauce, and then a little bit of red hot paprika, or not paprika, but Tabasco sauce. And if you want to use more, go ahead and do it. And then you're going to put in the pheasant breast, which has been cooked and then shredded. And then just mix this all up together. And once you fill the little tartlet shells, which are already baked, then you're going to sprinkle each of the filling, or the little filling on it, with paprika. Then you just go ahead and bake this in the oven until it's just golden and bubbly brown. And it only takes about 10 minutes. You put it under the broiler. And then here they are. Now, you could go ahead and freeze these at this point, but if you're going to serve them as they come out like this, they just melt apart. And I wonder if Bob Greiner is going to share any of these with us.
Absolutely beautiful. Fred, why don't you tell them everything that goes into this?
Well, you scarfing them all off of this plate.
That's right. Right.
Crying out loud, I got to grab some here. We hardly have any. He's got them all.
And keep your mitts off them too. I'll tell you, these little doodads right here are some powerfully good eating. They're small, and that's the only thing I have against them. I wish they were a lot bigger.
You know, seriously, I think they could be. You could put them on a whole English muffin or something, or I don't know
sure.
what.
You can make them any size you wanted
Man,
to.
I'd make big ones too. But the juicy, cheese, stringy, oh man. And you know, I bet I could almost imagine tuna being in here.
Oh,
or
just about anything.
just
Chicken,
about anything.
turkey.
Yeah.
Maybe even a rabbit, whatever.
What a versatile recipe.
Although we can imagine it. Don't change nothing. This is a fun. Hey, get your hands off of here.
I wouldn't have done that.
If this recipe doesn't strike your fancy, we must have tempted you with one of our fish and wild game delights in the past few weeks.